Cut my brother and his girlfriend out for leaking my baby news to my psychotic ex, and now my family is divided. My name is Emily, and a few years ago, I went through something that changed the course of my life. I had been with my ex-boyfriend, Jake, for over 5 years. We were both 27 at the time, and our relationship was moving toward marriage and searching for a home together. But everything came undone in our last year together. Jake had a sudden psychotic episode that turned our world upside down. He was taken to a mental health facility at the hospital for his own safety. When he came home, everything about him was different. His personality had completely changed. He began to experience intense delusions, hallucinations, and constant paranoia. The person I had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't recognize me as the person who wanted to help. He accused me of cheating, insisted I was manipulating those around him, and told me, over and over, just how much he hated me. It was heartbreaking. After some time, he was discharged from the hospital, and I assumed responsibility for him, hoping against hope that he would recover. I sat through every mental health appointment, and countless nights I stayed awake to make sure he wouldn't wander into the night during his psychotic episodes. But he grew angrier, and his paranoia became suffocating, impossible to penetrate. He stopped trusting me, yet he also wouldn't let me out of his sight, convinced I was betraying him. When I finally saw a slight improvement, I made the hardest decision I've ever made. I broke up with him. I waited until I felt he was stable enough to fend for himself and helped him move back in with his parents. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. I felt like I was abandoning him, but I had nothing left inside myself to give. I hadn't been loved for months, I was just the emotional punching bag, and all while grieving for the man I once knew who wasn't coming back. There are details about his condition I won't share to protect his privacy, but I never blamed him. I needed to save myself. I chose happiness, even though it meant enduring a messy, painful breakup. Despite everything, we tried to remain friends, at least for a while. During this period, I kept helping him when I could. I could tell Jake still hoped we'd reconcile someday, but I was moving forward. It wasn't long before I met Sam, an amazing guy, now my partner, a few years older than me at 30. The moment Jake found out I was seeing Sam, he spiraled into a severe psychotic episode. He threatened both of us, convinced I'd been unfaithful to him with Sam, even though I hadn't met Sam until after Jake and I broke up. The threats and messages were intense and unrelenting. My only thought was for our safety and Jake's well-being, so I contacted his family and told them what happened. They managed to get him help. I realized then that I could no longer maintain any contact with Jake. Trying to hold on to the remnants of our friendship was only making things worse, for both of us. The only tie I had left to Jake was Jess, my brother's girlfriend. Jess is 29, and she and Jake have been friends for years. She knew all the dark corners of our relationship yet never took sides. I considered her a friend, and it comforted me to know Jake still had someone he could lean on, even if it couldn't be me. Then, in March of 2022, my life took another turn. I discovered I was pregnant with Sam's baby. 3 months along, and just coming to terms with it myself, I shared the news cautiously with my family and a few close friends. I pleaded with everyone to keep it secret. I wasn't ready for a public announcement. I was a moody, anxious mess, nauseous and overwhelmed at the thought of dealing with any added drama. But less than 24 hours after sharing the news with my family, my phone rang. It was Jake. In a voicemail, he announced he knew I was pregnant, and then, in a delusional twist, said he was filing for custody of the baby. My heart dropped. I could tell immediately he was spiraling into another episode. I didn't respond, but instead, I reached out to his family, letting them know he had tried to contact me. I could only hope they'd be able to keep him safe, and that this drama wouldn't threaten the fragile new life I was just beginning to build. By this point, it had been over a year since Jake and I had even spoken. He didn't know where I lived or worked, so I wasn't worried about him showing up to physically confront me. The only way he could have found out any details was through Jess. I called her to confront her, and she admitted it right away. She was incredibly apologetic, insisting she hadn't thought it would matter. She believed Jake would be fine with the news and said he deserved to know. I was upset, but since I hadn't explicitly told her not to tell Jake, maybe she'd made an honest mistake. I had told her to keep the news to herself, but I bit down on my anger to keep the peace. I forgave her, but I made one thing absolutely clear: she was not to tell Jake any more information about me or the baby. She agreed. She promised it wouldn't happen again. Months went by, and I heard nothing from Jake. Then, last weekend, Sam and I had our baby shower. We'd planned it as a party more than a traditional baby shower, a hired function room at a bar, 80 people we loved invited to celebrate. For a while, the night was perfect: laughter, hugs, excitement, everything I wanted to remember about this new chapter. Then, in the middle of it all, I saw Jake standing by the bar, scanning the crowd. My stomach dropped. I managed to slip away before he saw me and found the security team. Our event space was roped off for us, so I simply told them he hadn't been invited. I watched, heart pounding, as security approached him. Instantly, his face contorted in anger and he started yelling, demanding to talk to me before leaving. Sam and some of our friends rushed over, trying to calm him, but it only escalated. He screamed at Sam, claiming to everyone that he was the baby's real father and insisting Sam and I had never really broken up. At that point, I left and hid in the ladies' room, trembling, until my mum came and assured me Jake was gone. Eventually, after more shouting, he left. I was mortified. The celebration ended early. I couldn't stop crying. A few days passed. My emotions hadn't settled, and I decided to confront Jess. She was the only person who could have told Jake where and when the baby shower was happening. This time, I didn't hold back. Jess admitted it immediately and apologized again, but then said, "How could I keep this a secret from him?" That infuriated me beyond words. I told her, with a voice I barely recognized, that she would no longer receive any information about me or the baby, and that I would be cutting her out of my life. I'm not proud of how I screamed, but I was in disbelief. How could she be so irresponsible? It wasn't her news to share. My brother called me after, asking for forgiveness on Jess's behalf. He admitted she was wrong but didn't believe he should be punished alongside her, knowing that by cutting her out I would also cut him off from any baby updates. He even pleaded that I should blame Jake for his reaction, not Jess, arguing that she never knew he'd show up and that the damage was already done. Honestly, I don't blame Jake for what happened. He is seriously mentally ill and needs help. It's not his fault entirely, and I know, deep down, he'll regret all of this one day, when he's in a better place. After everything that happened, I reached out to his family. They told me he had been readmitted to the mental health ward after threatening self-harm if he wasn't allowed to see my baby. As much as my heart aches for what he's going through, my feelings are clear. I don't feel safe anymore. I have a child to protect, and the thought that Jake believes this baby is his terrifies me. I haven't budged with Jess or my brother. My family all think I'm being too harsh, that my brother has a right to meet his niece or nephew. We still don't know the sex, but the truth is, I just can't trust Jess. She's already betrayed me once, and my fury is still raw. I keep thinking, what if Jake had confronted me at the shower or something even worse? Anything could have gone wrong. Now, I'm caught in the agony of not knowing what to do. My heart breaks at the idea that my brother might not get to meet the baby for a long time, but the fear lingers, that Jess might leak something else to Jake and put us in real danger. My parents and the rest of my family have all agreed not to tell Jess or my brother anything about the baby under threat of also being cut out. Still, I don't know how long I can stick to this before I crack. Sam, thankfully, is completely in my corner. Without him, I'd be a mess. I'm desperate for advice. It's getting harder to stick to my guns and keep this boundary. I keep worrying that, somehow, news will slip through Jess or another family member. My parents, especially, seem reluctant to promise they won't tell my brother when the baby is born. I feel like I'm hanging on by a thread. Update 1. I knew I needed to give an update, especially after so many people warned me about Jess, 29F, and, heartbreakingly, they were right. My life changed rapidly. My baby arrived earlier than expected. I am overjoyed to share that Sam, 30M, and I now have a beautiful son, who is already 10 weeks old, born at 38 weeks. Sam and I are absolutely besotted with him and couldn't be happier. Shortly after my original ordeal, Sam and I made a big decision. We moved out of our cramped one-bedroom apartment to a larger house, wanting more space for our growing family. A big consideration in our choice was distance. Our apartment had been only 5 minutes from my brother and Jess, and I just couldn't handle the anxiety of knowing Jake, 27M, might turn up unexpectedly, especially given I suspected Jess may have shared where we lived. Our new place is now a good 45-minute drive from them, an added layer of safety. We didn't tell them the address. We settled into our new home, and for the first month, things were blissfully quiet. I heard, through Jake's family, that he was still in the grips of a severe mental health crisis, under an extended hold at the hospital for a psychotic episode that just wouldn't subside. He was refusing medication. I had also warned his family about the depth of his involvement with Jess, and they took it seriously. They informed the hospital that Jess should not be allowed to visit. My family, for once, stopped pressuring me to forgive Jess. My mum, especially, had a heart-to-heart with me and, at last, truly understood why I had to cut off my brother. It broke my heart to push away someone I had always been so close with, but all of your advice rang in my ears and I realized I had to act to protect my baby. Of course, things didn't stay calm. A few months later, Jake called. He'd finally been released from the hospital. He was embarrassed, apologized for his shocking behavior at the baby shower, and admitted he knew the baby wasn't his. He sobbed, asking if he could speak to Sam directly to apologize. Sam refused, still hurt. I told Jake I forgave him, it wasn't really his fault, but said I could not allow him near me or the baby. If he tried, I would have no hesitation in contacting the police. He seemed to accept that, and we hung up. But 2 weeks later, Jake showed up at Sam's work, demanding to see him, desperate for forgiveness. Sam described the encounter to me. Jake broke down, apologized, and rambled in a way that made it clear he still wasn't stable, mentioning, "I'm so sorry for confronting you in public. Like that. I should have spoken to you privately. Clearly you didn't know the baby isn't yours and you were humiliated in front of your friends." Sam didn't want to escalate things and played it cool, saying he accepted the apology, and then asked Jake to leave. Immediately, Sam called me to share what had happened. Hearing this shattered me. Jess must have told Jake where Sam was working. I called Jake's family again. The next day, they told me Jake hadn't come home. Not only was he not allowed to drive, having lost his license for repeated speeding, but he'd taken his mother's car without permission. Days later, police found him, totally disoriented, inside a building under construction 20 hours drive away from our home. He was taken to the local hospital and hospitalized again. His family flew up to retrieve him. To this day, there's been no new update. His family promises to keep me informed if he's ever released. After that, my brother got in touch and asked if we could meet. He sounded upset, so I agreed. Lunch at a McDonald's. That day, he poured everything out. After Jake's psychiatric hospitalization, right after the baby shower, he had shown up at their house to see Jess. My brother was on high alert, immediately noticing Jake was manic and acting inappropriately with Jess, way too touchy-feely, while Jess replied in a way that was basically flirty. My brother felt so uncomfortable, he made up an excuse about him and Jess needing to go somewhere. He confronted her afterward, but Jess insisted she wasn't flirting and Jake hadn't been touching her. My brother ended up dropping it. Not long after, on the same day Jake showed up at Sam's workplace, it turned out, Jake visited their house again, but this time Jess was at work. My brother works from home. Jake confessed everything right then. He loved Jess, they'd been sleeping together, then showed my brother a slew of texts to prove he wasn't making it up. My brother promptly asked him to leave. When Jess came home, he confronted her. She first denied it before finally breaking down and admitting it was all true. She begged my brother for forgiveness, said she realized after the baby shower that she didn't love Jake, but my brother was livid and told her to go stay with her parents for a while. I haven't heard from Jess since. It's been months. Their relationship, as far as I know, is over. My brother feels incredibly guilty for what Jess did to me, but as much as I want to let him fully back into my life, I can't trust that he'd never reunite with Jess. Since they haven't formally broken up, I refuse to share our new address or photos of our son until I know for sure it's over. So far, my brother has only met my son once, at my parents' house. To this day, I don't understand why Jess involved Jake in my pregnancy. But I am beyond relieved to have them both out of my life. I haven't seen or heard from Jess or Jake since. I do live in constant fear Jake might show up again. Their intrusion has left its mark. I've developed obsessive behaviors. I need to check all the doors are locked 5 times and must touch all the windows in the house before I can sleep. But aside from all that, life has grown peaceful again. Sam and I have finally been able to settle in and enjoy our beautiful new life as parents. Update 2. I figured I'd share another update, since so much has happened and things have been heavy on my mind. Unfortunately, I don't have great news this time around. There was at least one good thing. My brother finally broke up with Jess. Things between us are still tense after everything that went down, but at least we can talk now, even if it's only being civil. Life with Sam and our new baby, though, that's been amazing. Being a new parent is unbelievably hard, but I find myself loving every second. I haven't returned to work after my maternity leave, and, honestly, I'm grateful Sam earns enough for me to stay home until I'm ready to jump back in. But then there's the news about Jake. For a while, I didn't hear from him or his family at all. Not long after everything exploded last time, I heard he was under long-term mental health care. Then, silence. I actually took that as a good sign. Usually, no news from Jake meant things weren't spiraling. About a month ago, though, I woke up to a bizarre text from him at 2 a.m. I hadn't seen it right away, but when I did, it made no sense. He talked about seeing someone who had come back from the future, said he was being followed, that he needed to hide. He mentioned Christopher Nolan, yes, the movie director, and said there were secret messages in his films that would help him win $1 million with some kind of hidden numbers. Believe it or not, messages like that weren't new to me, so I wasn't really surprised or unsettled. I just took a screenshot and sent it to his sister to let her know he'd reached out. Then I forgot about it. His sister didn't reply, which felt odd. She's usually quick to respond. 2 days later, she called me, in tears. She asked if I'd heard anything else from Jake that night. I told her no. That's when she told me Jake had died by suicide just hours after he sent that message to me, and to 20 others, it turns out. I don't know every detail, but apparently, that night he managed to steal his mom's car again, even though she'd been carefully hiding her keys. He ransacked the house and found them. Then he drove somewhere around the city, and nobody really knows what was going through his mind. What I do know is that he rammed into another car and pushed them off the road. They crashed into a tree. Thankfully, the young couple inside, both 17, weren't badly hurt. Later I found out it was all caught on a dashcam. He sped up behind them, hit them from behind, and drove off. It was a hit and run. With what we can piece together, Jake sent his strange, frantic message just 15 minutes after that accident. 3 hours later, he was gone. I won't get into the details of how the funeral came and went. I didn't attend, it just didn't feel right with our complicated history. Strangely, Jess went. I only know because she took a selfie of herself crying at the funeral, posted it to Instagram, and wrote a rambling caption about the importance of mental health support and caring for people. I felt disgusted. It's been incredibly hard to process what happened. I feel guilty even saying it, but there's a sense of relief that my family doesn't have to worry anymore. I do miss him. But in a way, I think I'd already grieved the Jake I used to know, when he began to change during our relationship. Now that he's actually gone, it stings differently. I can't even begin to imagine what his family feels. It's so hard for everyone, and it breaks my heart that things ended like this. We all hoped he would somehow recover, that the psychosis and mania would just fade away. Jake was a good person, just someone whose life was forever marked by mental illness. Update 3. I wasn't planning on writing another update so soon, but life has thrown me another curveball that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It's been 3 months since Jake passed away, and just when I thought things were finally settling down, everything got turned upside down again. About 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Jake's sister, Sarah. She was crying, which immediately put me on edge. Every call from Jake's family over the past few years has brought bad news, but this time was different. She told me they'd been going through Jake's belongings, trying to sort out his affairs, when they found something that made them sick to their stomachs. Hidden in his closet, wrapped in an old sweater, they discovered a box filled with printed photos of me and Sam. Not just a few, hundreds of them. Photos of us at the grocery store, walking to our car, Sam leaving for work, me pushing the baby stroller around our neighborhood. Some were taken from across the street, others from what looked like inside parked cars. The timestamps on the back show they were taken over several months, right up until a few days before he died. My blood ran cold. Our new house, the one we'd moved to specifically to get away from all this drama, he'd found us. He'd been watching us for months, and we had no idea. But that wasn't even the worst part. At the bottom of the box was a journal, pages and pages of Jake's handwriting. Sarah read me some excerpts over the phone, and I had to sit down. He'd written detailed plans about taking our baby. He was convinced that if he could just get the baby alone, he could prove to everyone that it was his child. There were drawings of our house layout, notes about our daily routines, even speculation about which window might be easiest to access the nursery through. The most chilling entry was dated just 2 days before his death. Emily will understand eventually. When she sees how happy the baby is with his real father, she'll forgive me. Sam is just confused. I need to save my son from this lie they're all living. I called the police immediately. They took it seriously, thank God, but since Jake is dead, there's not much they can do beyond filing a report. They did increase patrols in our neighborhood and gave us some security recommendations. Sam has been incredible through all of this. He immediately took time off work to install a full security system with cameras and motion sensors. The really twisted part? We now think we know how Jake found our new address. Remember how my brother had met our baby once at my parents' house? Well, it turns out that on that same day, my mother had written our new address on a birthday card she was planning to send us later that week. She'd left it sitting on the kitchen counter while my brother was there. When I confronted my brother about it, he broke down. He swore he didn't deliberately give Jake our address, but he admitted that after seeing the baby, he'd felt guilty and had called Jess to tell her about meeting his nephew. During that conversation, he might have mentioned that we'd moved pretty far out and made some comment about my parents needing the address for sending mail. He thinks Jess could have pieced things together and shared information with Jake during one of their secret meetings. My brother is devastated. He's been begging for forgiveness, but I told him I need time to process everything. The fact that his ex-girlfriend and her affair with Jake indirectly led to Jake stalking us for months, I don't know how to get past that. The strangest part of all this happened yesterday. I was at the park with the baby when a woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her until she introduced herself. She was the mother of one of the teenagers Jake hit in that car accident. She'd recognized me from photos the police had shown her family during the investigation. She sat down next to me on the bench and told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. After the accident, while her daughter was recovering in the hospital, Jake had apparently called the hospital multiple times trying to speak to her daughter. The hospital staff thought he was calling to apologize or check on her recovery, but this woman had a different theory. She thought Jake was trying to find out if her daughter had seen his face during the accident, if she could identify him. He was planning something bigger, she said quietly, watching her daughter play on the swings. I can feel it. When I heard about what they found in his room, about his obsession with your family, I think that accident might have been practice. Or a distraction. I don't know what to believe anymore. The police say there's no evidence that the car accident was anything more than reckless driving during a psychotic episode. But this woman's words have been haunting me. What if Jake's death wasn't just a tragic end to his mental health struggles? What if he was building up to something even worse? I've been having panic attacks again. Every time I hear a car door slam or see an unfamiliar vehicle in our neighborhood, my heart starts racing. Sam suggested we consider moving again, maybe even to a different city, but I'm so tired of running. I just want to raise our son in peace, without constantly looking over my shoulder. The only silver lining in all this is that it's finally made my parents understand the gravity of what we've been dealing with. They've stopped pushing for me to reconcile with people who've betrayed my trust. My dad even offered to help us move if we decide that's what we need to do. I keep thinking about Jake's journal entry, about him believing he was saving our son from a lie. It terrifies me to think about what might have happened if he hadn't died that night. Would he have tried to break into our house? Would he have hurt Sam or me to get to the baby? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. For now, we're staying put but staying vigilant. The security system gives us some peace of mind, and I've started seeing a therapist to help me deal with all the trauma from the past few years. Some days are harder than others, but I'm determined not to let Jake's illness and obsession steal any more of my happiness. I just never imagined that even in death, he'd still find ways to terrify me. Update 4. I honestly didn't think I'd be writing another update, but the past few weeks have been absolutely insane and I need to get this all out. Just when I thought Jake's death would finally bring some closure, everything has somehow gotten more complicated. It started about a month ago when I got a Facebook message from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Rebecca. Her profile looked legitimate enough, and she claimed she'd been Jake's girlfriend for the past 8 months, right up until he died. My first instinct was that this was some kind of sick joke or another delusion from someone in Jake's orbit, but something about her message felt different. She wasn't angry or accusatory, she just seemed confused and hurt. Rebecca said she'd found my name in Jake's phone and wanted to understand what their relationship had actually been. According to her, Jake had told her he was completely single, that his ex-girlfriend, me, had moved away years ago and they'd lost touch completely. He'd never mentioned the baby, never mentioned the stalking, nothing. To her, they were in a committed relationship and even talking about moving in together. I was skeptical, but curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet for coffee in a public place. When I saw Rebecca, I immediately understood part of Jake's obsession. She looked eerily similar to me. Same height, same hair color, even similar style. It was unsettling, like looking at an alternate version of myself. Rebecca showed me hundreds of text messages between her and Jake. Love notes, future plans, photos of them together looking genuinely happy. But here's the really disturbing part. The timestamp showed that some of their most romantic conversations happened on the exact same days he was stalking me and Sam. On the day he took those photos of me pushing the stroller, he'd sent Rebecca a message saying he couldn't wait to have kids with her someday. She had no idea about his mental health issues. Jake had apparently been incredibly good at hiding his episodes from her, always making excuses when he disappeared for hospital stays. She thought he was going on work trips or visiting sick relatives. The night he died, she was expecting him to come over for dinner. She'd been calling and texting, worried sick, until his sister finally contacted her days later to tell her what happened. But here's where it gets really twisted. Rebecca mentioned that about 2 months before Jake's death, he'd started acting strange about her job. She works at a daycare center, and suddenly Jake was asking lots of questions about security procedures, daily routines, which children belong to which families. She thought he was just showing interest in her work, maybe thinking about their own future family. Now, knowing what was in that journal, I'm terrified about what he might have been planning. After meeting Rebecca, I couldn't stop thinking about all the gaps in what we knew about Jake's final months. So I did something probably stupid. I called his sister Sarah and asked if we could go through more of his belongings together. I needed to understand the full scope of what we'd been dealing with. Sarah was hesitant at first, but she admitted she'd been having the same questions. We met at Jake's old apartment, which his family hadn't fully cleaned out yet. What we found made the photo collection look tame by comparison. Hidden behind his bedroom dresser, we discovered another box. This one contained detailed maps of our neighborhood, Sam's workplace, even my parents' house. There were printed Google Earth images with routes marked in red pen, notes about security cameras in the area, and times when certain locations were most or least busy. But the most chilling discovery was a folder labeled Emergency Plans. Inside were multiple scenarios Jake had written out, like he was planning some kind of mission. Plan A, convince Emily to meet privately. Plan B, approach through mutual friends. Plan C, create crisis requiring Emily's help. And then, at the bottom of the pile, Plan D, direct action necessary. Under Plan D, he'd written pages about the layout of our house, our daily schedule, and something that made my blood run cold, detailed notes about our baby's sleeping patterns, feeding times, and which room he slept in. Jake had been watching us closely enough to know when our son napped, when he was most likely to be alone in his crib. Sarah was sobbing by the time we finished going through everything. She kept apologizing, saying she never imagined it was this bad. But then she told me something that changed everything. The night Jake died, before he took his mother's car, he'd made a phone call. The phone record showed it lasted 17 minutes. Sarah had assumed he'd called a crisis line or maybe Rebecca, but she'd never actually checked who it was. When we looked at his call log that day, the number was one I recognized immediately. It was Jess. I confronted my brother about this, and he went white as a sheet. He admitted that yes, Jess had gotten a call that night, but she'd told him it was a wrong number. She said some crazy person had called rambling about needing help, and she'd hung up quickly. My brother had thought nothing of it at the time, but now I'm wondering, what if Jake had called Jess with some final plan? What if she knew more about what he was intending to do that night than she let on? The timing is too convenient. Jake calls Jess, 17 minutes later he steals the car, causes the accident, and then dies by suicide just hours later. I made a decision that Sam initially disagreed with. I reached out to Jess directly. I needed to know what Jake had said to her that night. She was reluctant to meet, but I pressed the issue, and eventually she agreed to talk over the phone. What she told me left me speechless. Jake had called her in a complete panic, saying he'd messed everything up and needed her help with something important. He'd begged her to meet him somewhere private because he had something that belonged to me that he needed to return. Jess said she'd refused, told him to leave it with his family or mail it to me. That's when Jake had gotten angry, started yelling about how everyone was against him, how no one understood what he was trying to do. But here's the part that haunts me. Jess said that right before hanging up, Jake had said something like, "If I can't make this right, I'll make sure no one else gets hurt because of me." At the time, she thought it was just more of his usual dramatic rambling. But looking back, knowing what we know now about his plans, I think Jake might have realized that night that he was never going to be able to execute whatever he'd been planning. Maybe the car accident snapped him out of his delusions long enough to see how far gone he was. Maybe his death wasn't just a psychotic break, maybe it was the only way he could think of to stop himself from doing something even worse. I don't know if I'll ever have all the answers. Rebecca has been helpful in filling in some gaps, and she's actually become an unexpected source of support, someone else whose life was completely upended by Jake's illness. We've been texting regularly, and it's strange but comforting to talk to someone who cared about him too, even if neither of us really knew who he'd become in the end. The security system is staying up, and Sam and I have decided to stay in our house. Running away won't change what happened, and honestly, I'm tired of letting Jake's ghost control our decisions. Our son is thriving, completely oblivious to all the drama that surrounded his early months, and I want to keep it that way. The therapy is helping, though some days are harder than others. I still check the locks obsessively, still feel my heart race when I see unfamiliar cars in our neighborhood. But I'm learning to live with the anxiety rather than letting it consume me. As for my brother, we're slowly rebuilding our relationship. He's been incredibly patient with my trust issues, and seeing him with our son, watching him be such a devoted uncle, reminds me why I don't want to lose him too. Jess is completely out of the picture now, and I think he's genuinely relieved to be free of all that drama. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jake had gotten the help he needed earlier, if someone had recognized how serious his delusions were becoming. But I've learned that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and trying to do so can destroy you in the process. For now, I'm focusing on the future, on raising our son in a safe, loving environment and building the peaceful life that Sam and I dreamed of before all this chaos began. Jake took so much from us already, I won't let him take our happiness too.